the wellness radio you were saying beforehand, so that was what more specifically just around like what Paul checked, like just different people that again are doing just very different things, or did it have a bit of a like a cohort of people that were all sort of working together? Because I don't really know the other names. So Paul Check.
Well, yeah, again, Sean Cruxton was the host of that podcast, and as a personal trainer, I think it was an opportunity to A, create a podcast, and B, for himself to learn. And as he built his reputation, he was able to draw in bigger names. So Sally Price from the Weston A. Price Foundation was on there, for instance.
Yeah, right.
A huge name. Obviously, Weston A. Price was a researcher back in the, I think it was the 40s and 50s and that type of thing. Created a book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, which has sold millions of copies. The Weston A. Price Foundation came out of that, and Sally, I believe, is still directing that. So again, to get her on, she's talking about everything from agriculture to holistic healing to the quality of food and water and how that enhances our health. So those are the types of names that Sean had on there. It extended into pain and injury, but it was really how do you optimize your health and how do you live your best life type of thing. So it was a very unique podcast.
And that would have been what you said 10 years ago. So that's.
Well, I've lost track. It'd be 10 years for sure. 10 years.
Because that's pretty much like at the. Well, I don't know when the forefront was, but the forefront, I think you'd be the best to answer this, like holistic health, that style of talk, methodology, philosophy, whatever exactly it is. I mean, that was relatively new, 10 years ago-ish, I want to say?
Yeah.
I mean, even what you did with the Genius Body, which we'll get to as well, holistic health didn't really seem to exist a whole lot when you sort of really entered into the space yourself. But like, when would you say holistic health was becoming more of a thing in like the 2000s, in the teens? Like, when did you sort of feel it was starting to become a bit of a thing?
I think it depends on what part of the world you're speaking about. Obviously, living in Western Australia at that time, as we created the BioGenius Institute, that was 2012 that we started that type of thing. And as that institute grew, we realized that there was space in the market. As you start to Google and you start to look at Google Analytics, you realize that people are starting to get aware of holistic healing, and yet there wasn't anybody in that space. And so what you do is you create the category, and then once you create your own category that nobody's in, you market the heck out of the category. So when people start to market the category and look for a holistic physiotherapist or a holistic healer, well, the only business in that category is you. And so from 2012, 13, 14 through to 2018, we really didn't have any competition. And then there became copycats in Western Australia, which is people seeing our logos, people seeing what we're doing. And certainly we saw an explosion of the term holistic healing or holistic practitioners around 2018, 2019.
It did seem to become one of those sort of buzzwords in a way where I don't know what it was prior to that, but all of a sudden it was just holistic healing. Even through university, it was trying to look at the bigger picture. So obviously we'd sort of reduced things down to their finer parts, and then we'd gone into full specialization, and that seemed to be, I guess, maybe like the general medical health approach, whether it be through physics or chemistry or just, again, through medicine itself, breaking things down to its smallest parts. And then it seems like some movement obviously shifted back away from that and tried to incorporate the whole. And so holistic became the big thing. But I mean, I don't think I was aware of that sort of transition back and forth. I was just all of a sudden aware of, well, of course it's about holistic health. Not exactly sure what was sort of prior, but did you have an understanding of what was like prior? Was it like a reductionist type stance?
Well, I guess for myself, I'm coming from a personal training and strength and conditioning background. That's what I did in Canada. And so for a 7-year period in strength and conditioning, you're dealing with athletes. And if you want high performance athletes to improve, you have to look at them more holistically. If you only do strength and conditioning, your results will be good, especially if you're very good at programming and running that out. But if you enhance their performance with good nutrition and hydration, obviously they excel even further. If you can bring in supplementation, then again, they'll move forward more quickly. But then you get into things like, well, what about recovery? And that wasn't a big topic back in the early 2000s. Whereas when I got into recovery, I was one of the first people that was pushing recovery more than the training side of things. And a lot of the athletes I was working with were excelling. And so I think when you're dealing with that population, you have no choice to be more holistic in your approach if you want these people to excel and you want to look good as a therapist or a practitioner, or in that case, a strength and conditioning coach. Where I came to Australia and studied physiotherapy, obviously, by nature of what a physiotherapist is, they're really highly trained to deal with three energy systems. So you're looking at the bones, the skeletal system, you're looking at the nervous system or nerves, and we could throw in the muscles on top of that. So that's three. Maybe you can include the breathing system or respiratory system as well. So you become more highly focused into those areas, but I don't feel it was well brought to my attention that other systems of the body, such as the digestive system, the immune system, etc., cardiovascular system, will influence the bones, the muscles, and the nerves and my ability to get somebody better. And that became the approach of, well, is that holistic healing? And that's where I became more aware of, if I paid attention to the other 8 systems of the body, well, then the systems I was highly trained in would become or heal more quickly.
So is it fair to say that your move into, I guess, the holistic health, looking at multiple systems, and we'll hopefully get to actually even just basically list out some of those systems as well. But that sort of approach, do you think only came about because you're working with the sports population who they're looking for the 0.1% difference at that elite level in order to be the best in the world or the best team in the world, wherever it is. So every tiny little small percentage that you can increase to improve that performance, you have to look broader than whatever it is that's directly in front of you. Do you think that approach is still mimicable, or is it still relative to the everyday person that's just looking for, I don't know, to get out of back pain?
It's a great point. Again, a body genius, or the body genius institute, we went into all of this, and some of the slogans we came up with, there's a genius in every body, and it started to play off body genius. But one of the things we said there is that there's an athlete in every body as well, or an athlete in every person. And if you treat everyone who comes through the door like an athlete, meaning that you're giving them 110% in multiple categories, they're going to heal from any pain or injury more effectively than if you see them as a regular citizen. So if an athlete comes through the door and you're saying, hey, I'm going to approach this with, hey, are you getting proper sleep? Are you recovering from training? Have you squared away your nutrition and your hydration? Well, then isn't the regular, weekend warrior going to benefit from the same advice? And we proved over and over again with thousands upon clients that was the case.
How do you, and I'm going to go back eventually to give some context to where we're at right now, but I'm on a bit of a roll here within my own head. So how do you, for someone, again, the average person that comes to you, or that did come to you maybe in the past when you were first starting out on this journey with just non-athlete populations, so to speak, how would you look to try and get buy-in for people when you've got all these potential systems that you could invoke or try to help them with, and try to get them on board with, kind of like an athlete's prescription that you'd give them, given that the notoriously, I should say, in something like the physio world, an athlete is very, very good at sticking to whatever it is that's given in front of them. Non-athlete doesn't always stick as well, and I still say that's mostly the practitioner's fault than it is the client's fault. But for you, how did you find the process of trying to get buy-in when that's a much more complex, broad approach, as opposed to I'm just gonna touch your back and you'll feel better?
I mean, this really gets into marketing and how you market yourself as a practitioner. And so again, if you are really good at that, you're going to market yourself as a holistic practitioner. So people begin to search for holistic practitioners. They find you in that category. They go to your website, and your website has to be a reflection of who you are and the way you practice. And if they don't resonate with the website and the messages on that website, they're not going to come to you. So there's already buy-in because they've gone to your website, they've read, they like what they're reading and they're listening to. They're searching out a holistic practitioner, and they're coming to you in the first place. The other thing is that over the last decade at least, I'm usually a second or a third or a fourth opinion. And so people haven't got the benefits or the outcome that they desired with other practitioners. By the time they come to me, they're open to almost anything. I've seen multiple people, I haven't got the results. What can you do for me? In my intake forms that they fill out, one of the things I'm asking is, what are you looking for in a practitioner? And 90% of them are saying, I'd like a holistic approach to my pain or injury. So there's already buy-in at that point. Secondly, in my intake forms, as you're filling it out, there's information or questions about dental. There's information about stress, sleep, food. All that is leading them into the process that I'm going to follow. And so there's already buy-in again. Otherwise, they wouldn't come through the front doors.
So fair to say, not a typical physio, and yes, we got there to finally introducing more systematically what it is your profession technically is.
Yes.
And I guess now to give a little bit of context to where we've just been sort of already been talking about, but you're a Canadian born, I believe, and then you obviously worked within, I think it was sort of exercise physiology fields, personal training, strength coaching. So you sort of were amassing a wealth of knowledge in general fitness, movement, strength, all those sort of domains. And then you eventually transitioned or came to Australia and transitioned into physiotherapy, plus taking on a bunch of other certifications. But at that early stage, the exercise physiology, the personal training, the strength coach, did you just find that each of those you were moving to for a particular reason or problem? Or did you feel that there were holes in each of those, or were they, again, just sort of extensions of one another?
Look, I grew up in a sporting background, and so I played ice hockey from 5, 6 years old right through till 25 years old before coming to Australia. And so, as you get to a more elite level in Canada with hockey, you're exposed to many of these different professions. We had chiropractors and physiotherapists, team doctors, massage therapists that were all there to help you, condition you, get you prepared for games, and help you recover from injuries. So I was exposed to a lot of that as an athlete. And so as you move into personal training and then into strength and conditioning, you recognize the value of all those different professions. So I think it was bringing a lot of these talents together and recognizing it was a better outcome when you combine all of those skills. So it was a very obvious thing that I had that background with me. Once you get your physiotherapy qualifications, why would you not bring that knowledge and skill into physiotherapy? And I kind of took off my physiotherapist hat and I put on a hat which I called therapist, which allowed me to think more broadly and not get into just the defined scope which many physiotherapists do, which is to say, here's my set of skills and I have to practice within those limits. I realized that I had a broader range of knowledge, a broader range of skills, and that I could bring those into the way I practiced.
Is there a reason that you went into physiotherapy as sort of the standard professional career as opposed to something like a chiro or a naturopath or anything else?
Look, I probably didn't know what a naturopath was back then, to be honest with you. I dealt with them, again, a little bit through being an athlete, but chiropractic, again, I read about that. I studied that a little bit, but I felt probably physiotherapy was the best fit. And certainly at that time, I felt that probably physiotherapists in Canada had a greater runway into the types of athletes or types of clients that I wanted to deal with, which is what led me to physiotherapy.
And on physiotherapy, so I believe you sort of started in physiotherapy about year 2000,
Yep.
or graduated 2000 or started 2000?
Started 2000.
Okay, and roughly, this is maybe a little bit of an open question, but what did physiotherapy, do you think, teach you, and what did it maybe not teach you enough of?
Well, it certainly taught me how to research. It was very research oriented back then at Curtin University. And so I became a skilled researcher. I was very independent with asking questions and then knowing how to find those answers. Back then, the team or the instructors at Curtin University were excellent. The teachers and practitioners were fantastic. And so I gained an incredible understanding of what physiotherapy was and how diverse it was. I knew pretty much from the first year that I was in physio, I wanted to be a private practice physiotherapist and not get into the medical system or into the hospital system. So most of my independent time was spent with other private practice physios and learning from them. But physiotherapy, I guess, gave me a great insight into pain and injuries and rehabilitation and the ability to find answers through research.
And then the things that you potentially, whether it was straight away or maybe later in years, is there anything that you wish physio had sort of done more of, or you were happy for it to be, or still happy for it to be, again, sort of a little bit more of a specialized area? As you said before at the beginning, like it sort of focuses on 3 systems as opposed to more systems as a therapist. Like, do you think that's a reasonable stance for it to be in, or would you like it to see it sort of evolve or reach out to other systems?
I think it's challenging because there's so many different areas that physiotherapy covers, and therefore you have to look at the neurosciences, you have to look at cardiopulmonary sciences as well. And so you have to take those physiotherapists and prepare them that they could go into any of these areas in physiotherapy. For myself, who was moving into private practice, I recognized that there was limitations as to what they could cover in just a 2.5 to 3 year period of time. And so I took it upon myself to spend at least 2 days a week, 6 hours a week, sitting in with highly skilled private practice practitioners and learning from them. And I did that for 3 years straight. And so I knew what it was missing, but I went out and got that before I graduated.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Just because there might be some other physio students, people looking to, again, go into a certain profession. And it sounds like you actively went out to find certain people and then I'm guessing shadow or just ask them questions. Like, how did you actually go about doing that?
I think it was second or third year, and you get into a practical situation. And in that practice situation, there was a physiotherapist, Brett Slocum, who was a sports physiotherapist. And when you've been into many different practices, you can recognize when someone's highly skilled. And although he was pretty young at that point, maybe 5 years out, he was highly skilled. And so I remember just saying to him, if I come in and I work for free and I study for free, can I learn from you? And he said yes. And because I progressed so quickly, he was happy to have me in there 3 hours, on Tuesday, Thursdays, and he would take the time to teach me. And so literally I did that for 2 or 3 years, learning under him in my own time. And so by the time I graduated, I'd probably already consulted with hundreds of people under his guidance and really hit the ground running.
It's a big difference between someone that's coming out into the world with a little bit of confidence and gusto behind them compared to normally when you leave university, you realize that you actually have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah.
All the theory, even some of the prac work that you will have done as well. It turns out that you sort of get into the real world, particularly in private practice, I would say. And I think you feel pretty sort of lost and unsure. So that seems like a nice little way to sort of bridge that gap in the early days. And so do you still now, many years later, do you still specifically seek out people as of even today to try and learn more skills?
100%. I think that, it's a really valuable thing. You can watch all the videos you want. You can study all the research you want. It's then how you apply that research to being a skilled clinician. But where you can get out and watch multiple professions practice, whether that's dentists or sports doctors, getting in with chiropractors, if possible, osteopaths and other physiotherapists, watching the way they ask questions, watching the way they assess and the way they treat. I mean, there's some really skilled people out there that you'll never hear of. And when you can watch it right in front of your face and watch it up close, you learn so much. And so, I'm always setting aside time for 2 to 3 hour blocks and going in and learning from other people.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, so it does sound like a very good practice to try and uphold as well. How's your practice? So from the moment that you're learning from Brett Slocum, and you're sort of taking in the way that he sort of assesses, treats, you've already got a background in, again, your exercise physiology, personal training, strength coaching. So you've got this, again, wealth of knowledge. Plus you're an elite athlete yourself in hockey, both in Canada and I think in Oz as well.
Yeah, that's
right? So again, you've kind of got the actual wisdom of experience in that sort of domain. So you're working with athletes, I'm guessing, a lot of the time. But how has your practice, do you think, evolved or changed over the years from that sort of early stage to now? How different is it?
Well, incredibly different. I mean, my first practice was working under someone else, and it was really a situation where it was a house. It was multiple rooms. We had a podiatrist. We had 3 other physiotherapists. One was public health and women's health. And so it was learning from the team in there, but at least 50% of my work were people kind of 60 to 90 years old. And so, when you're working on that cohort of people, it's going to be a different experience than when you're working on athletes. So 50% was not quite geriatrics, but elder people or older people. And then 50% was the population I was going after, which is gym goers, CrossFit people at that time, and athletes as well. That evolved when we finally got out and formed our own practice, the BioGenius Institute, which was 2012. Really, we're going after the athlete population. It was called Athletic Excellence. That was our slogan. We were trying to get all of the athletes from Western Australia. We were trying to get the weekend warriors to come in the front door, and we were pretty successful. You'd be looking at 80 to 90% of the people coming through the front door that would identify with the word athlete. And that went on from 2012 to 2019 after the BioGenius Institute closed. Then it was starting this practice here, Effortless Superhuman. I probably was tired at that point, and I think that from an athletic point of view, those clients are demanding. There is no such thing as 9 to 5 with those types of athletes. You're on 7 days a week, morning till night. And so I probably toned it right down back to 50-50 again, accepting the general public to come in, which I found less physically and mentally demanding. And now I'd sit probably at about 70-30, where 30% are athletes or the athletic community, and 70% is just people who have pain, injury, or health-related issues that they're trying to overcome.
And so the types of things that you do now for the population of people that you're seeing is obviously shifted over time. And then the process with which you sort of, again, assess and then treat those people, I'm guessing has evolved. I know it will have evolved a lot over the years. Right now, if someone walks into your clinic, whether it be an athlete or a non-athlete, what's sort of the general process that one might expect?
Look, again, I recognized very early on as a practitioner that I didn't really like the system that was being followed by a lot of physiotherapists. And that is that you sit down with them in front of a piece of paper, you're paying them anywhere from $2 to $6 per minute for them to fill in your name and say what's going on and where's the pain and ask all these questions, when really, if you've got good intake forms, the person can sit at home, take their time and complete that for free. If you're willing to do the work as I am, then you can spend 5, 10, or 15 minutes reading that work in advance before the person walks in the front door, understand who the client is. You can review scans and the reports that come from those things and gain an understanding of who they are. So the first thing is understanding what their good outcome is in the first place. Why are they coming to see? What are they trying to achieve? And making sure they're clear on that. Getting rid of pain isn't their good outcome. If someone has shoulder pain and you say, why are you here? And they say, get rid of shoulder pain. Well, I don't have shoulder pain. Why do you even care if you have shoulder pain? Usually there's some sort of dysfunction attached to that shoulder pain, in that I can't throw my kids in the pool, I can't play tennis with my friends. There's always an emotional context to why they want to get out of pain. And as soon as they're clear on that, and as soon as you're clear on that, you know what you're trying to achieve, okay? So I think that as a client comes through the door, I'm really aware of who they are, what challenges they've had, what treatments they've had, where they're trying to get to, and then it's figuring out what role I play in that process to get them their good outcome.
Do people struggle to fill out, the intake forms? Is that something that do you find like the answers behind them end up being quite in depth, or like what's the sort of answer response that you get from those? Because I know in clinic, if you do something like that, obviously it's strained, you don't have that much time. So
Right.
Answers are going to be a little bit potentially lagging or a little bit rushed.
Yeah.
So the quality of what you're getting, is that dramatically different, you found?
Very much so. Look, I want it to be a barrier to entry. In other words, I don't want people coming in that aren't going to put the effort into their own health and healing. This isn't a passive approach where I come in, you come in, and I fix you. This is where you come in and we work together to get your good outcome. So part of that is saying, I'm willing to sit down, I'm willing to complete this paperwork, think about why I want to see you and provide answers. And if you're not willing to spend the 10 or 15 minutes doing that, well, then I don't want to see you anyways. So it's a good barrier to entry. But most people, as I said, who are now second, third, and fourth opinions coming through my front door, they're willing to take that time. I get a detailed history, understand what's going on, and I already hit the ground running in that first session.
So for someone that's coming in for an issue, they've already filled out an intake form, so you've got a pretty good sense of the person so far as you can from an intake form. And then when they come in, is it you're doing particular type of assessment? Are you interested in their posture? Are you interested in their strength? Are you interested in their nutrition? Like, what is sort of your next stage of how you try and assess what issue this person really is dealing with?
90% of those people are going to have some sort of pain in their body, and typically it's what they deem to be musculoskeletal or neural pain. And so it is going to be a step-by-step process that I go through, and it's the same for each of those clients. And so, in a nutshell, it's in a standing position. I have a sequence I go through from top to bottom. So whether you're coming in for a knee injury or coming in for a shoulder injury, I go through the same sequence. And people say, well, why would you have to assess the lower body in relation to someone with a shoulder injury? Now, if that person swims or plays recreational tennis or golf, well, then a lower limb dysfunction, such as a big toe that doesn't move or an ankle sprain they had 10 years ago, and they have a debilitated ankle, is going to affect the performance of the hip and the shoulder. So if you don't glean or understand those challenges in their body in the first or second session, you end up working on their shoulder and going in circles over the next few months, and then you fall in the pile of the other practitioners that couldn't get the person better. So I've done this screen so many times that I can screen almost everybody in less than 20 minutes, and that's head to toe, nerves, muscles, joints, neural gliding techniques, and really understand them in 20 minutes.
How are you, from my side as a practitioner, how are you making note? Are you using a lot of just memory that you'll then record later, or are you recording as you go along?
I can get through the entire process and then record at the end of the 20 minutes, and I can get it on paper in 2 minutes. Now, I like to go paper, and then we'll just upload those results. But yeah, I go through the entire 20-minute process. I have no problems remembering every detail for 20 minutes, and then I write it all down.
For someone that's coming in, again, so as you said before, maybe they've got like a shoulder pain and you're checking out their lower limbs, how often do you find that those dysfunctions someone's coming in with, there are relationships across parts of the body that they wouldn't have expected?
80% of the time.
Wow.
Huge. It's huge. And again, it's things that's missed. You go in and you have someone with neck pain, and you go in and you find that they have impingement within their hips, and they only have 90 or 95% of hip flexion. And this person is sitting and driving cars, or they're going to the gym and they're doing leg press or back squatting with hip impingement. And therefore the lower back, the lumbar spine, the thoracic spine, and the cervical spine is under load. And yet nobody has told them that they have femoral acetabular impingement. And so when you pick that up and you tell them what's going on at the hip level, and that you're not going to correct their neck if we don't find some resolution to their lower back and hips, often they're shocked to hear that for the first time. But I would say in 80% of cases, I'm finding things that has been missed by other practitioners that is an important key to the solution for that person. And
then for, again, because as you're saying before, lots of people are coming to you, they've seen multiple people beforehand, so the problem's, eluding or elusive to others. And so you're finding these things which are relational to the issue that they're coming in with. But how often as well do you go through your process at the moment and then at the end you're stumped? Do you find yourself getting stumped, so to speak? Or like how often even are you going, look, at the end of this process, not sure, maybe you should go see X or Y person?
Sure. Look, I think it's important. I created the concept of what's called a short trial of care. And that can be anywhere from 2 to 5 sessions. Nobody likes to come in and see a practitioner and find out that 30 days later they're not getting any better. Mm-hmm. And so a short trial of care says, I understand what's going on, and to prove to myself and to yourself, I'd like to change your pain and your symptoms, and I'd like to make progress in 2 to 5 sessions. If we hit session 4 or 5 and both of us don't feel we're heading in the right direction, then we have to put a stop to the process and say, okay, clearly there's a misdiagnosis here, clearly we've missed something, or the treatment techniques I'm using aren't effective at that point. And so at that point, you have a range of options. One is you could turn to imaging, for instance. You can look at MRIs or X-rays. You can turn to EOS scans. So there's a range of images that you could take to further clarify the diagnosis. It's also based on the intake forms where, as you read through those, you say, is there any compounding variables? Is there anything I'm reading where, say it's a shift worker who's up from 10 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning for 2 weeks straight before coming home. We know there's chronic sleep challenges. Is that going to impact on the healing process? I'm trying to identify that right up and know whether I should begin hands-on therapy or whether I should focus on other lifestyle factors first. And so I'm trying to clarify that up front. But if I'm getting into a treatment process, again, it's that short trial of care, and it's proving to myself as much as them that I can make a difference in as little as 3 to 5 sessions.
All right, so you're pretty upfront with that. Yeah, okay. Because I find even myself now, I'm trying to get to the point of being much more comfortable and forgiving on self, if not finding the exact cause or whatever, even just within a session. I like to do hour-long sessions to try and give myself enough time to go through everything that I can think of to try and paint the picture. And then if I don't find something, then part of me just goes, God, you're terrible, Harry. You suck. You're the worst. But I like the fact that you at least just the upfront of, look, this is what we're going to try and achieve within a certain time frame, because I think this is what's going on. And if that's the case, then we should be able to make ground within that sort of given period.
Well, I think the other important part on this is that, again, the person is typically coming to you for pain and symptoms. I feel like too many practitioners are chasing pain and chasing symptoms around the body. In the vast majority of people, you're going to find restrictions, dysfunctions. And so examples of dysfunctions are things like a hip joint that won't flex or rotate, or maybe the person can't look over their left or right shoulder. Those are measurable outcomes. So on a piece of paper, we can write down the person can only turn halfway to their left, or they can turn fully to their right. In a lying position, their straight leg raise is 30 degrees on one side and 60 degrees on the other side. Where we treat to change movement patterns, typically there's a corresponding reduction in symptoms. And so whether I'm doing releasing, whether I'm needling, whether I'm doing exercise therapy, I want to see a measurable change in patterns of movement in the body, whether that's clinically or functionally on the floor.
So you're less interested in some ways about the pain specifically and ridding the body of the pain itself. You're more interested in returning function that you've sort of measured prior. So pain scores, do you still take people's pain scores, or do you talk about pain much?
Yeah, no question. There's no question. I think you have to say, well, where is the pain? Because some of these clinical challenges, let's say you're dealing with tendinopathy, for instance, and you've got patellar tendinopathy. You know the person has patellar tendinopathy. They take a single finger and they point at their patellar tendon. It's very precise, as opposed to taking their whole hand and covering their knee, which is probably a different clinical diagnosis. So I think asking them where their pain is, what their pain score is, that's going to demonstrate that the therapies you're using or the advice you're providing is effective over the course of sessions or over a time period. So I think that's important. But again, the last thing I want to do every time the person comes in is ask them about their pain every 5 minutes. First thing you walk in and go, how's your pain? Because typically I say to people, we're not going to achieve pain resolution until we basically tell the body to turn off those pain messages. Pain is there for a reason. Pain has been generated or created for different reasons. Bursitis, for instance, or inflammation of the bursa, or a swelling of the bursa, which stimulates a pain response, becomes the pain generator, is often there to protect you, typically underlying tissues like rotator cuff tendons. So to turn off that pain stimulus, you have to restore balance to the neck or restore balance to the shoulder so that you don't turn off the pain. It's the brain and the nervous system that turns off that pain.
So if I'm getting it right, it does sound like a lot of your focus does end up being on, again, sort of like the functional movements that people can perform. And if there's an obvious imbalance between those range of motions, as an example, then that would be a higher order of correction that you would go for, as opposed to simply trying to do something to agitate or change the pain response specifically. And you were saying before as well that 80% of the time someone says that they've got a shoulder impingement or whatever it may be, there may be a relative factor going on elsewhere along the body that you'd also want to address, which could actually end up making a bigger difference in the long term. Is that sort of roughly?
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Again, I think there's a big difference between clinically clear and functionally clear. So clinically clear is in this room. It's what I can do in this room. And so the first thing to be clinically clear is that we can get the person out of pain or reduce their symptoms to an acceptable level where we can hit the floor and do more functional based assessment and training. So in a clinical situation, if the person has shoulder pain, they're not clinically clear just because you get rid of the shoulder pain. If they can't lift their arm above shoulder height and you're sending them back to play tennis, that's not clinically clear. Clinically clear is, well, we've alleviated your shoulder pain, but in addition to that, we've been able to restore proper turning of your neck, proper function of the shoulder. Tennis requires thoracic or middle back movement, so we've got optimal thoracic movement. It also requires you to lunge and run on the court, and therefore we need lower back and hip mobility. So clinically clear is resolution of symptoms, but it's also head to toe, to the best of our abilities, restoration of function at all the major joints, muscles, and nerves.
And so this is why it's so important for someone to set out their goals of why the pain matters to them, so that you can understand what it is the body needs to return to for them. So rather than it being optimal for a particular, for just the given person, you're always trying to really optimize it around whatever potentially optimize whatever their goal is. So for instance, if they want to get back to playing tennis with their friends,
Sure.
Well then you'd want to get all their mechanics that allow that tennis play back to full strength.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the functional side of things, which is you get out of this room and you say, okay, that's clinically clear. Things are looking pretty good. You get on the floor, and just because someone's ankle and knee and hip move well clinically, it doesn't mean they're going to be able to go through a full depth squat and make it look good. And so you have to get on the floor and then say, well, can the person lunge and squat and do all the primitive patterns of movement, as Paul Chek would say, and that they're at least functional in those movement patterns. And so examples of that are something like a Gray Cook, who came up with a functional movement screen, which is 7 tests that are scored from 0 to 3. And again, on a very basic level, can they get a 2 or a 3 on functional based testing so that they qualify to go back to the sport or activity that they want to get involved in?
So for someone coming in, are they going through the sort of clinical analysis, and then once that's cleared, then going to functional, or are you sort of running through both simultaneously?
It depends on the individual, but almost in 90% of cases, it's a clinical setting first. And I'm trying to answer the question for myself is, how close can I get them to clinically clear? If someone comes in with a an arthritic knee, whether it's X-ray, MRI, and the knee is shot. It doesn't mean they're in pain, but I can't get any more flexion or extension at that knee. There's no point in me treating that clinically if I can't get better flexion extension. Okay, because the knee has been eaten alive by arthritis or some sort of inflammatory process, and I have got to it too late. At that point, we say that's a dysfunction that I can't change. But once I've restored balance to other dysfunctions in the body, I then take that person and I'll look at it from a functional point of view and say, hey, given the dysfunctions that we're not able to change, how do we create the best movement program or exercise program for your body? And how do we adapt to some of the dysfunctions that you have?
So you'll sort of separate them in some sense. You go, look, there's the clinical side of things. If we can clear them, essentially they can go back to their life without worrying about the discomfort that they were in for the most part. And then the functional side of things is really if you also want to be able to move across in the world to the best of your abilities, this is a good way to screen and then prepare for your body being able to manage those types of things. So you did mention before some of the types of functional screen tests. Roughly, what are some of the ones that you might take someone through?
Yeah, look, again, if we're looking at standardized testing that has research backing to it, then you look to someone like a Gray Cook and his functional movement screen. I think it was Phil Plisky that came up with the Move to Perform software, which incorporated the functional movement screen, but also brought in the lower quarter Y balance test, the upper quarter Y balance test, functional hop testing, and then dorsiflexion at the ankle, and putting all that information into the algorithms of the Move to Perform software. Setting parameters like male versus female, age, and choosing the sport and the skill level that they're participating at, it would give you an injury risk profile so that you know what is the likelihood of injury if that person returns to sport at this time.
So clinically for you found that sort of matches what the research is showing, that when you're getting the results from someone going through and performing these tests, you do see that the risk associated that you get at the end of it has been similar to what you would expect, or it's been like informative enough to make an impact on that person?
Yes. Yeah. And so again, in that analysis, you're getting an injury risk profile coming back where it doesn't look good. They're at a high risk for future injury, even though they might be clinically clear. You're then going to take the time and do the movement therapy or the exercise prescription, and then prove through repeating those tests that they're actually progressing from a functional perspective. And in doing so, you reduce the risk of future injury in any given activity or sport. Now, that is backed by scientific research. So we know that someone that undergoes a ACL repair, for instance, and let's say it's on the right side, so the right side is the affected side, you need to get the right side hopping within 10% or less of the left side. So it can't be more than a 10% deficit. Otherwise, returning to footy or returning to running is going to carry a greater risk to it. And that's a measurable outcome.
Okay. And you mentioned before Paul Chek and some other people as well. I can't remember the names that you mentioned as well. But how have they influenced or coloured, this approach that you're taking? What sort of elements have you sort of brought in from these types of practitioners across your journey so far?
Yeah, it's been extensive. I've been watching Paul Chek present since the 1990s. We're talking 30 years ago, and watched him evolve as a practitioner. And in my opinion, he's one of the most skilled practitioners on the planet. I've studied under him by doing his holistic lifestyle coaching levels 1, 2, 3, and taken all his online courses as well. So I certainly value the information that he has put out, and I think he's helped millions of people. There's other skilled practitioners as well, and we have access to them online now through podcasts and online courses and programs. And so I'm always gleaning information from who I deem to be other skilled practitioners. And of course, I've incorporated that into everything from the way I assess to the way I treat and the way I rehabilitate people on the gym floor.
Do you find anything from what you're doing to be, if you were to do X few things, you get 80% of the juice of what you're after? It's a bit of a cheat code sort of thing, I'm guessing I'm going for. But yeah, do you find certain things that you do tend to create the most amount of change, or things that you continue to repeatedly use or really sort of talk about?
100%. 100%. So if you want my cheat code, the reason people aren't healing from pain and injuries is because of what they're doing to themselves. You're coming into a skilled practitioner and you're saying, I've got kneecap tendonitis, we'll call it patellar tendonitis, or tendinopathy is a better word for that, patellar tendinopathy, and yet I'm drinking a bottle of wine every night. What are you expecting the exercises to do for you when you're drinking a bottle of wine every night? what are you doing to help yourself to get better? And the answer is, in most cases, people are preventing their own bodies from healing and getting out of pain. And each individual might have their own vices, but sometimes it's I'm working night shift and I'm up from 10 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning and not sleeping, or my sleep is from 6 a.m. till 2 in the afternoon. So it can be sleep issues, it can be highly stressed people, it can be alcohol, it can be food and inflammation that causes chronic inflammation in the body. But many people are it's a continuum, but on the continuum of a diseased state. And therefore, healing musculoskeletal, neural injuries, your likelihood is diminished as a physiotherapist or any treating therapist. And so if you want the cheat code, well, the first thing you do is identify these variables and then teach the person to change them and put their body into a state that will heal itself.
Do you ask of someone to be able to, I guess, whether it be like habit changes, lifestyle changes, do you have a big emphasis on sort of tracking that or making sure that the person stays accountable? So how do you, I guess, manage someone that loves a glass of wine each night? Do you work around them ever when they're like, I'm sorry, I just, got to have that glass of wine whilst I'm cooking dinner for the family? Do you sort of allow people to work around it, or for you it's a hard, you've got to follow this?
Again, it depends on the individual, but again, you get someone coming in here with chronic pain and they're in trouble. You can't do it half-assed. You can't say, hey, simply eat food a little bit better, or go from half a bottle of wine to just one glass of wine. These people are in trouble. Their bodies often are in a chronic state of inflammation. There might be disease processes going on, and you're wasting their time and your own time. And more importantly, you're wasting your own reputation. Because when you don't get them better, it reflects poorly on you. And so you have to really help them to understand, and most people aren't aware of this, and that is that if they don't change, they're not going to get any better. So the first thing is to identify and track what they're actually doing. One of my favorite things to do is a 3-day lifestyle diary. And so when they get up in the morning, I want a piece of paper and I want them to write down everything they do from morning till night. I got out of bed at 6:01. I went to the toilet, went pee at 6:02. I went in the kitchen, had a glass of water at 6:03. I went and showered. I came out. What did I have for breakfast? Then I had my supplements. I went poo at 10 o'clock in the morning. Well, what was it like on the Bristol chart? Was it a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 on the Bristol chart? I had coffee at 10 o'clock, and it wasn't one shot. It was 2 shots with full cream milk and sugar in it. I want to know everything that happens from morning till night and do it for 2 or even 3 days in a row. So many of the people that get better quickly with me are ones where I recognize what they're doing to themselves to prevent or delay healing. And when you change those lifestyle factors, their body helps to heal itself. Now, they'll tell me it was the hands-on therapy I did, or the specific type of needling I did, or the corrective exercise I gave them. But if I'm honest, 80% of the time it's what they did for themselves.
Do you find, so the people that are coming to you, that you find that they're quite open to this sort of lifestyle change, and do you find that people sort of tend to maintain when they've found things to be helpful to their bodies in this healing process? Do you have any insight as to whether or not people will sort of continue on with these lifestyle changes, or once again they're out of pain, it's a slow back down to those old habits?
Well, very few want to fall back into that. Once you feel the benefits of looking better, feeling better, not being in pain and everything else, like everyone, we're going to test the boundaries, aren't we? And so therefore someone might bring coffee back into the equation, or they bring alcohol back into the equation, and they know they can get away with a couple of drinks a week without getting the symptoms back. So they're always going to test the boundaries of those things. But where someone slips back into too many bad behaviors and they get inflammation again, they get back into pain, they know exactly what to do to get themselves out of pain again. You've educated them at that point, and they don't want to fall back into that state. So I'd say the vast majority have been educated to say it's in your hands. Do you want to be in pain, or do you want to thrive in life and feel good?
It sounds like there's a lot behind how you're trying to figure out what someone is currently dealing with and how to get them out of a particular state. And again, we've sort of touched on some of the people that you've specifically taken information from, Paul Check being one. Where does someone go to learn, I guess, also just more about the things that have helped you or helped colour the way that you treat, analyse people? Because I haven't heard of too many people, if anyone, in WA that goes to the lengths that you do at the moment with even just the 3-day lifestyle diary. It seems like you're very much a big detective on what's going on in every aspect of someone's life to uncover that major issue, which seems like a not something that you would see many people doing, if any, because there's a lot of work on your end as well, right? Just to try and go through all that vast sum of information. So, again, is that coming from a lot of Paul Chek stuff? Is that coming from other sort of functional medicine stuff that you've done, or is it a combo?
Look, I think, to live in the year 2025 is exceptional because not only do you have access to the best practitioners on the planet, whether it's through blogs or podcasts, etc., the vast majority is free. I mean, if you've ever sat down and listened to Joe Rogan, for instance, he's got some of the highest performers on the planet sitting with for 2 or 3 hours. When previously, whether you like him or don't like him, when previously could you sit and listen to the President of the United States speak for 2 to 3 hours? It never happened 10, 20, 30 years ago. And same in the area of health, where Paul Chek has his own podcast, and you can sit there for hours on end with free content and listen to one of the most brilliant minds on the planet speak about health and wellness and interviewing some of the best professionals on the planet. And so whether I turn to Joe Rogan, whether I turn to Paul Chek, Diary of the CEO is another podcast, and he's very diversified in the people he's bringing on, but some of them are health professionals, whether it's doctors, dentists. He's talking about men's health, women's health. We have access to brilliant people. All you have to do is make the time, sit down and listen, and then it's really in the application, which is what do you do with that information, and how do you put it into practice?
So for yourself at the moment, what are some of the things that you have tried to incorporate into your lifestyle? Because to me, it seems like from all appearances that you practice very much what you preach. So what are some of the things that you specifically do for yourself on any given day or week in order to try and fulfill sort of these lifestyle decisions and choices that you're telling other people that they should sort of subscribe to?
Yeah, look, it's a real discipline. And one of those decisions was to wrap up the Body Genius Institute in 2019. Those were some highly skilled people in there. And it was difficult to close that business, but it became a very big business. There were a lot of practitioners in there. A short week was 40 hours. Most weeks were 50 to 60 hours, highly stressful. And so when that closed and creating this current business, it was a conscious choice. And really, there's 3 of us that run this business, one from home and my PA receptionist who sits at the front, and I'm a sole practitioner. So that has taken a tremendous amount of stress off of me, allowing me free time not only for study and progression as a professional, but secondly, to be healthy and well myself, and then to focus on my family. In my own life, I'm in the gym 4 to 5 days a week, and I make time for that. It's a big rock. I try not to move that around. And then, I eat healthy. So I'm focused on whole food eating. I'm focused on 3 meals a day. And then it's health and happiness, which, for me is my wife and my family, my kids.
And just on the food as well, organic? Don't want to open too much of a can of worms, but...
Look, I think it's a fair comment. In Perth, we're lucky we have a wide range of markets that you can go to, and therefore organic or at least pesticide-free food is widely available in Perth. There's also, hormone antibiotic-free meat available in Perth, and wild-caught fish as well. So we do have access to really good food regardless of where you live in Western Australia. And
what about water as well? Do you have any particular idea about what sort of water should be drawn, filtered, done? Does tap matter? Again, maybe for my own interest.
Yeah, look, from a tap water perspective, I think you don't have to go much past testing your own tap water, and I've done this in 5 or 6 different suburbs. Be a little careful how I speak here, but test it yourself, and I don't think it's drinkable. I think you're going to make yourself sick by drinking Perth tap water. We're a very warm climate, and certainly in the summer months, you can smell the chlorine come out of the water. If you're in the shower, you can smell the chlorine. And the last thing you want to do is shower in hot, steamy, chlorinated water or drink that as well. That's just the chlorine. If we then bring fluoride into the mix, we have to say, to what extent is fluoride safe and effective in our water? This is a hot debate for 25 years. I certainly know in the US that they're looking at taking fluoride out of the water, but I think the research, in my opinion, is overwhelming to say fluoride shouldn't be in the water. And so you're trying to filter out chlorine, fluoride, and other harmful chemicals out of the water.
Still crazy on that one, like the fluoride put into the water to help with, wasn't it to fight cavities initially?
Of course,
that was sort of the main reason. And then, fast forward 50, 60 years, cavities are still not that great. And, maybe a host of other problems have popped up. I'm very interested to see that if America does go ahead and ban it, does Australia just follow suit? should we potentially look at that a little bit sooner?
Look, the good thing is you can do it yourself these days. And so, I recommend shower filters where possible. Those are easy to access online and they're cost effective. And then from a drinking perspective, obviously you're looking for the different brands and you're looking for something that's going to filter out 99 to 100% of chlorine, fluoride, heavy metals, and other toxins.
Yeah, I think we got a water filter a couple of years ago. It's one of the ones that meant to filter out 99.99 whatever percent. I forget the name of it actually, unfortunately, but getting used to that and then having like a bit of tap water afterwards, I didn't realize it's sort of you don't realize what's in front of you or what's happening until you get used to something else, and then when you try and go back to something like tap water and you're like, oh my god, that actually does smell like pool water at the moment. So
it's crazy when you're out at a good restaurant and they'll bring over tap water and you just look at them like, you're not serving me tap water in this restaurant, are you? And you have to complain because it's unacceptable. You have to get filtered water, but you can smell it straight away as soon as they bring it over.
It is surprising that, again, water, the thing that we have to have access to all day, every day, and drink it, hasn't been maybe more widely talked about in a Western society such as Western Australia, Perth. So, but yeah, as you say, at least everyone's got access to, you can buy water filters, and so you can solve that problem yourself. You don't need to wait for someone else to get that done. But I wanted to go back to a little bit of your Body Genius Institute, because so you were saying before, it was quite large, had a lot of practitioners, and I have no doubt the amount of work required going into just building up to begin with is enormous, let alone just the work involved in trying to keep it running, and the system of it is a difficult one at most. But how did that practice actually come about, and how did you pull together, I guess, the people for it?
Yeah, again, I was relying on a skilled personal trainer to help me with some of the exercise rehab I was doing. I just couldn't handle it all. And so he came in and started doing gym-based rehab, pool-based rehab, and helping me with some of the more challenging clients. And he was very skilled. And so together as co-directors, we created the Body Genius Institute. So again, I was a practitioner in the room, handling more of the hands-on therapy side of things. He was on the floor doing a combination of rehabilitative therapies, but also a lot of the strength and conditioning side of things. But as the business grew, we realized neither one of us could handle that level of business. And so we hired our first strength and conditioning coach, and together we upskilled that person I did more of the upskilling for rehab. He did more of the upskilling for strength and conditioning. And that skilled practitioner is still with me today and working alongside me. Exceptionally talented professional. From there, again, my ability to practice 50 hours a week dictated that we needed more skilled practitioners. So we hired another physiotherapist, we hired a chiropractor, and expanded from there. We then brought on a naturopath and also a functional practitioner as well. So we're handling a lot of medical cases, health-related issues. And so we had all the areas covered.
And what is a functional practitioner exactly?
Well, when you speak in functional medicine, again, you're looking at the 11 energy systems of the body. And so a functional practitioner might look at blood work differently than a regular GP would look at blood work. They're also willing to dive often into other things like hair mineral analysis and stool samples. They're more skilled at getting into, again, lifestyle diaries and looking at the way people are living their lives and those lifestyle factors that need to be changed. So they have a greater scope of practice and probably more tools in their tool belt.
So it sounds like right now, you can't set up in Effortless, Superhuman. You're sort of the Body Genius Institute had all these different professions, and you sort of condensed them back down into you just doing all of those professions again. So it's sort of almost as if the Body Genius Institute was you sort of separated into the different specialized parts, and then now you're back by yourself again. You're like, oh, I'm just going to do all of them myself.
Within reason, yes. But again, I know my limitations. And so again, one of the things after 27 years is that you know who the highly skilled people are out there. And so I have naturopaths, functional doctors, physiotherapists, chiropractors, functional dentists, skilled sports doctors. And I rely on all these people to help clients get to their good outcome.
You just said functional dentist. Again, what's a functional dentist?
So again, this is someone who looks at craniofacial structure. So we're looking at the structure, the head, face, and jaw, and how it's developed in the individual, and how that impacts on the jaw and the functioning of the joints in the jaw and the teeth and their development. But also recognizing that will impact on the spinal column itself, the pelvis, and how a person goes about their daily lives. So where someone has foot pathology, hip pathology, or spinal pathology, that can have a negative consequence on the head, face, and jaw, and that only focused on the jaw might not get the outcome that you want. So a functional dentist, again, is one that we define as more holistic in nature, okay, and is seeing the whole person as opposed to just looking at teeth and at the jaw structure.
Okay. I don't think I've personally even heard of a functional dentist until right now. So
Yes.
I did want to go as well on the Body Genius Institute as well. You did have your quote that you briefly mentioned beforehand. There is a genius in everybody. There is a wisdom with everybody. And just wanted you to maybe unpack that a little bit more as to what you meant by that.
Look, I think when you say there's a genius in everybody, this goes back to Hippocrates a long time ago. And it was that wisdom in the body that allows us to heal. I think the best thing is if you ever owned a dog or a cat and they get unwell, you say, what do they do? And the first thing they do is they go and they hide and they don't eat. They might drink a little bit of water and they lie there and allow their bodies to recover and heal itself. Whereas in modern society, we go to the drugstore and we're either getting drugs or we try to get supplements to smash our bodies with something to make the symptoms go away. So I think where we say there's a genius in every body, that's in the innate wisdom within our bodies to heal itself. Nobody cuts themselves and then lies in bed all night worrying about how that cut's going to heal. We have the confidence that our body can heal itself. I believe, unfortunately, over the last 70 years that we've been convinced that we no longer have that healing capacity within our own bodies and that we require other professionals of various kinds to heal ourselves. And it's not that we don't need that assistance in some cases, but many times if we stop doing the things that are suppressing our ability to heal, the body will heal itself.
And this is what you mentioned beforehand about, again, those lifestyle factors.
Yeah.
So you're essentially saying that you believe the body itself is much better at healing and fixing our own problems than we perhaps give it credit for, and simply getting out of its way might actually provide more of the key to a healthier or less painful body than not.
Yeah, I mean, I could parade hundreds of clients in front of you and say, these are cases where they were failed cases by multiple practitioners, doctors, medications, and everything else. It's like, how did you get them better? And it's not that I necessarily did any miracle hands-on therapy or created some concoction of supplementation to help this person. Often, in many cases, it was helping them to understand what was going on in their body and then what was the step-by-step process to encourage their body to heal itself. And, physiotherapy perspective, that's things like osteoarthritis or rheumatoid arthritis or some inflammatory joint arthritis where the person is requiring medications, injections to try and control that. But it's not a cure. It's simply to help them get by day to day. And it is that detective, as you said earlier, where you have to go to blood therapies, you might have to go to stool samples, and you have to say, well, what's happening within this person's body and what's the step-by-step process to unravel that and allow their body to heal itself.
How much emphasis do you just mentioned beforehand, supplements, and that we're in a world where you kind of either throw some form of drug or supplement at someone in the hopes that it clears up whatever the issue is. How much do you find that you do end up looking to supplements to provide some assistance? Is it a lot of the time, only some of the time? And again, do you sort of just weigh that as like only a very small fraction as opposed to like the main method for healing?
Look, a case-by-case basis, and I often have hundreds of people on the books at one time that I'm trying to case manage and assist. And so there's always going to be people using supplements or drug therapies. Where someone, not that they're coming to see me, but if someone has a chronic chest infection and a really bad bacterial infection, not that you can't use natural supplements for that, but if it's that bad, I'm going to be relying on naturopaths and more skilled people to handle that. And if it gets that out of control, of course, you're going to turn to antibiotics to help get rid of that bacterial infection. From a supplement point of view, I really don't sell supplements. There's no monetary reward to me selling supplements. And therefore, when I prescribe supplementation, people are buying it online and using it for themselves because I truly believe it's going to help them reduce inflammation, take away pain, or overcome some sort of pathology in their body.
Do you believe or do you think of yourself as a specialist in any particular domain or of a particular pathology that people come in with, or it sounds like you have an ability to sort of look at a wide varied amount of different problems that people come in with and try and figure out for each individual body what those problems are. But are there cases that you sort of prefer or like have a certain like towards that you go, these are the types of cases I really like?
Sure. I think the first is I can't use the word specialist. I'm not a
True,
specialist in anything.
Sorry, yeah.
Specializing in, there's certain things that I've done for a very long period of time. And so where practitioners have studied dry needling or needling as a whole, I've done that for 27 years now, and I've taken advanced courses in that, and I've spent thousands of hours needling people to great effectiveness. And so I'd say I am specializing in using needling for taking away pain, changing dysfunction, and alleviating symptoms. I'd say I'm very good in that category. Along with hands-on therapy, I've sat in with skilled massage therapists, Bowen therapists, physiotherapists, osteopaths, and watched how they use their hands as tools, and then spent thousands of hours practicing to try and perfect those skills. So I'd say I'm very strong in those areas. I do have 30 years in exercise prescription, whether it's for high performance or rehabilitative therapies. And so again, I consider myself highly skilled in those areas. From a clientele perspective, there's no question there's an ego involved in where someone has seen multiple practitioners and not gotten the answers they want or can't overcome their problems, and you're able to get them across the line to a pain-free life. That's incredibly rewarding. And so there's no question I thrive on that type of client.
Okay, so the more complex and the more difficult someone's been or previously had not had success with other forms of healing, you find that that's sort of the ones that you start smacking your lips going,
it's exciting. It's super exciting. And as I said, because the intake forms are so extensive, often the answer is in the way they answer the questions, the information they put down, and you really have a pretty good concept of who the person is and why they're not getting better before they even walk in the practice. And then if you go through, a really detailed approach to assessment, you can unravel things quickly. And then, as you said earlier, which is there one thing or two things this person could do that would really change the course of their pain or dysfunction? I kind of look at it like a house of cards. You build this house of cards, you don't need to start at the top and take one card off the top all the way to the bottom. If you can look in the middle and pull a single card out and half the house of cards falls, that's kind of what you're looking for in these cases. So where someone's drinking too much alcohol and you take them to zero alcohol and they stay there for 30 days, all of a sudden inflammation reduces in their whole body and they start feeling significantly better. And that may lead them into greater amounts of exercise. And so the key behavioral change may be taking away alcohol, or the key change might be removing processed foods from their body, or the key change might be, I had a woman with chronic migraines who came in here. I looked through her bloods. The doctor said that her vitamin D levels were normal. Vitamin D goes from 50 to 200 as the normal range, and hers were 53. Mm. So I took vitamin D, supplemented her up to over 100. I think it was 110 or something like that. And in less than 10 days, her migraines were gone and her neck pain was gone as well. And that's the only thing I did. And so I think, again, where you're looking for these key factors that will make a change quickly, I think you jump on those.
Did you know, in that case, for example, the vitamin D case, were you aware of a link between the vitamin D and like migraines and neck pain? Or was this specifically, you were more just interested in the fact that this is on the lower end and, are we interested in someone just meeting within the criteria of what is considered healthy? Or are we more interested in like, well, if we get everyone to where we would hope is what would you call it, healthier level of something like vitamin D, what changes does it make? Do you have a bit of an insight into that?
Yeah, look, on my desktop, I have a document that's taken 20 years to create. I call it a therapeutic system. And so really what you're looking at here is there scientific research that connects factors such as low vitamin D, low iron, low hemoglobin, anemia, to the inability to heal from conditions like disc disease or something like tendinopathy? And the answer is yes, there's tons of science to back that up. And so that therapeutic system has allowed me to say, let me expand my analysis outside of just what I can see clinically and what I can assess through movement therapy and into things like working with skilled practitioners like doctors to say, can we get a blood panel done and make sure it just looks fairly clean? Where someone is super low in vitamin D, where someone has anemia. Do you really think you're going to get somebody better with tendinopathy who has low hemoglobin and is anemic? someone who has a ferritin level, which really should be closer to 80 or 100, and it's sitting at 27, and you think you're going to solve that person's tendinopathy, well, the scientific studies would tell us that probably you're not. And yet most skilled clinicians aren't aware of those connections. And so that's where I've developed a wide body of research, which are all in folders, and all those links are put into this therapeutic system. And it's just so that I'm aware that, again, low vitamin D, low magnesium, low iron or ferritin, and other markers may be limiting this person's ability to heal.
So you won't necessarily always go down the route of doing these sort of blood tests, or will you typically do that for most people just to get a baseline understanding of what their levels and how their system's working?
In most cases, people have had this work done, and so part of my intake forms is, and my skilled PA who sits out the front is to say, can I get all their scans loaded up for me in the system? Can I get all their previous blood work and everything there? I know what I'm looking for, so I'll scan through it and see what's been tested. If I have concerns, well, then again, I can work with their doctor and just say, hey, are you aware of the links between low values and their inability to heal from injury? Are you aware that certain things like low vitamin D may predispose them to disc pathology, and disc prolapses or disc bulges? And can we work together to supplement these people back to a normal range and then figure out why they can't maintain those ranges?
So you do speak a lot with the other practitioners that this person's involved with and try and create that sort of community of healthcare around them.
Yeah, you have to. And I've created a wide range of doctors who are more open to this stuff. I mean, with a neurologist in October who, I worked with a client who had Guillain-Barré syndrome and got better in 5 weeks. And she was just amazed at how that happened. And then looked at the stool sample that we had done and saw links between parasitic infections and Guillain-Barré syndrome and said, how did you uncover this? And so I'm meeting with her just to walk through those things. Now, my skill set is limited at a certain point, and I need to sit with her and go, can you please take over at this point and assist with this process? And that's where you bring your skills together with someone else's skills and help this client get to their good outcome.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, if I was the person, I'd be ecstatic to see that kind of continuity of care and sort of integration going on between different practitioners, because I think it would give you a lot more confidence that, all right, the story is being uncovered, the treatment modality is making sense, and like everyone's getting on the same page, which I do feel a lot of people, myself included as well, feel probably a little bit fractured at times about how their healthcare is being run between whether it be GP and specialists and others in the traditional domain. It does seem like there is probably a little bit of siloing between professions, and so the same story has to be repeated and certain things get missed along the way. And so I think that frustration would be felt by a lot of people, just not having the communication open between. So it's good to hear that you're doing a bit of that. Do you have any particular case studies that come to mind for you that you really love sort of talking about from a story point of view? I thought we'd give maybe just a couple case studies of people that you've worked with that might resonate with someone else that's currently out there listening to this right now that might have an issue that they go, maybe there are some potential options out there for me to look out to, whether it be reaching out to you or at least giving them a little bit of like, oh, okay, maybe it's worthwhile doing a little bit more investigation on what's going on.
Look, a couple spring to mind, and there's clients where they say, I was just at home and I reach over to pick up the box of Kleenex and boom, there goes my back, and I've had MRIs done and I've prolapsed a disc or I've bulged or herniated a disc. And you say, this person's 30-something years old, they're relatively fit. Why is it that they would bulge a disc by leaning over to pick something up? Now, in a trained physiotherapy situation, typically we're going to say there was mechanical forces, and we immediately jump to, do you drive cars for a living? Are you doing repetitive tasks for a living? Was the nature of your sport that did it, or is it old age, even though they're 30-something years old? Of course not. And so those types of cases, it isn't just about resolving their symptoms, which again is typically a team effort, but it's hands-on therapy, it could be movement therapy, but it's also saying, why did this happen? And in those types of cases, that's again where you can go to blood work and say, this person was vitamin D deficient, and there is research, meta-analysis studies demonstrating that low vitamin D or low ferritin is linked to these types of challenges, such as disc bulges and disc herniation. And so those are the types of things is trying to understand why that might happen in someone who's 20-something, 30-something, or 40-something. It's not all mechanical forces. And it's really a message to people out there as a preventative type of thing. It doesn't matter if you're 20-something or 30-something, go to your GP, get a blood panel done, and just make sure that your body is in balance. And that if it isn't in balance, well, what can you do to bring it back in balance? Other cases that spring to mind are things like what's called sclerosis, where you look at the spinal column and you look at the end plates of the bone and you say, we're seeing hot spots or we're seeing inflammatory changes to the spine. And again, the person might be 30, 40, or 50 years old, and you say, this is a degenerative change. It's an inflammatory change. It's not age-related. So what is the underlying pathology behind this? Why might this be happening in that person? And that's again where we can say, do we have to go to genetics and say, are they predisposed with genetic mutations that might implicate this type of condition? Is it because of poor nutrition, heavy metal toxicity, poor water quality? Is there stool samples we could take that would demonstrate parasitic infections that may cause this type of problem? So there's often underlying pathology that demonstrates why that process is in place. I've seen 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds where we're replacing hips. We're replacing hips in them, and that can't be age-related. 50 years old and your hip is gone. And so we then say, well, what's the underlying process? And again, with the help of medical doctors, I've gone to either advanced blood therapies, blood analysis, advanced stool samples, and found answers in that, where we put the inflammatory and autoimmune process and stopped it, and so that it doesn't get any worse.
So someone's coming to you and they're soon to get a hip replacement, like they're scheduled for one, and you're sort of given a little investigation and then providing some sort of stop to what was the process that was leading to that really sore hip and potential hip replacement. Like that's what you're sort of saying?
Certainly in some cases you can stop the process and they don't get a total hip replacement. You've caught it early. Other times your hip is done. The one gentleman I think of, his hip was done by the time I saw him. This is a total hip replacement. It is bone on bone. It's just when it's going to be done, and he had it replaced. Now the conversation then become, do you want to get a second hip replacement? Because that's going to happen if this process continues, and then it could be double knee replacements. This isn't a process that's isolated to your right hip. Okay, and so therefore, if it's a systemic process, can we put a stop to the systemic process so that it doesn't affect other spinal joints or spinal segments? It doesn't affect other joints within your body.
And how many people that come in to see you have, autoimmune diseases, digestive issues, other health issues that might be hanging around that they're not coming in for? That do you tend to find that if someone comes in again, let's just say the back pain is a simple one, but it turns out they've also got some digestive issues and maybe they've got an auto skin condition going on. Are you interested in those? I know you mentioned before that you're interested in like all the 11 systems, so I'm guessing that yes, to some degree. But then do you do things specifically for them in the hopes that it also helps with the back, or how do you sort of approach when people go, oh, actually, yes, I've also got this. Oh, actually, yes, I've also got this.
Well, again, I don't like to lose, and to win with clients means that you help them get their good outcome. So where someone comes in with back pain and other practitioners have failed to help them get their good outcome, and many of the times you look at the way they were assessed and you look at the way they were treated, it was perfect. So why didn't that yield the outcomes they want? Even when you turn to x-rays or other radiological evidence and there's signs of inflammation or pathology, it doesn't mean that that's the pain generator. It doesn't mean that's what's giving them their back pain. And so then you sometimes go, well, what are your bowel actions like? And they're like, oh, I go to the toilet once every 3 or 4 days. Well, that's a huge issue. That's constipation, and constipation can lead to back pain. And so we have to, as practitioners, to be aware of this. And again, say if someone is constipated and they have chronic back pain, then often those things are linked. Same with bloating and digestive upset that can lead to back pain as well. So we can't always assume that because we see pathology on scans that that's the pain generator for lower back pain. So again, it's being investigative, it's being thorough with your analysis, and then knowing what you can handle and when you need to bring in another practitioner to help get rid of their symptoms or to help deal with a system that's overloaded.
How do you suggest people think about the issues that they have in terms of, I've got some issue that's been hanging around for a little while. Do you suggest to people, oh, look, as soon as you start to feel something going off, reach out to someone, whether it be a GP or otherwise? Sort of, do you have a general recommendation of someone that's, been living with, even if it's something minor, some sort of minor discomfort, but it's been 6 months or so and it's been hanging around, or again, whether it be something like a digestive issue, do you have a particular way that you sort of go, probably look down this route and actually do something about it?
Well, I think you need to build a team of mentors around yourself as opposed to looking at them as a therapist. The same way we might have a life coach that's going to help us design our life in a purposeful manner and help us walk through week by week, month by month to achieve what we're trying to get in life. I think you can do the same in the health and wellness sector as well. And whether that's a highly skilled GP, a highly skilled physiotherapist, chiropractor, etc., you want someone who's going to mentor you through healing processes. It doesn't mean they have to have all the answers, but they may act as a case manager for you, meaning I'm going to be an independent party that's going to help to look at what you're going through and which steps we take to get you out of trouble. Don't wait until your neck pain becomes something like chronic arthritis. Let's pick it up early. Let's look at the underlying processes and let's put a stop to those and alleviate your symptoms. So I think the first is forget about the title of the person, whether it's physio, chiro, osteopath, GP, functional practitioner. Find someone that you trust, someone that you can work with. I think somebody probably that looks at a whole person approach, that doesn't simply prescribe medication every time there's a symptom. Not that there's not a place for medications, but you want someone who's going to say, well, why are you having this symptom in the first place? And is there things you can do to alleviate the pain or the symptoms? And what do you need to do that? And then work with that person to maintain health.
Where does someone find this kind of person? I suppose that's one of the trickiest things, hence why we're doing Healers of Perth to begin with, actually. But from your experience as well, do you find that a lot of practitioners that you've dealt with, whether it be new or old, are starting to come into this kind of mindset? Do you think it's still early days? I
don't think it's early days at all. I think Perth is a hotbed for highly skilled, what I would consider to be holistic practitioners. I could name 20 off the top of my head right now. Now, they may have the title of dentist, but they're a functional dentist. And when you go in there and they start talking about essential oils to get rid of infection in the jawline, you've got to be open to that. If they start talking about the fact that your scoliosis in your spine might be contributing to your jaw disorders, or that your highly stressed lifestyle is causing you to grind your teeth, then it shouldn't matter whether they hold the title of dentist or whether their title is functional medical doctor, chiropractor, physiotherapist. But in Western Australia, there's tons of these, many of them, not many, but there were several that came out of the Body Genius Institute, and they're still operating within Western Australia. They just hold different titles.
And for someone that is, again, maybe looking for that sort of health mentor, so to speak, do you personally see clients who are sort of using yourself as like a health mentor on an ongoing basis, like you would a coach, where you see someone, maybe you check in every 3 months or 6 months or once a year? Is that the sort of relationship that you have with a lot of clients?
It's a big job, and so the answer is yes, but I can only take on so many. So I probably have a dozen at any one time, and some of those have been with me for 5 or 6 years. And part of that is to act as a case manager. And so I'm liaising with a specialist, I'm liaising with their GPs. We've got Excel charts and everything else, and monitoring their health, taking height, weight, skin folds, girths, and everything else, taking DEXA scans, and ensuring that they have optimal health at all times. But that's a big job to take on a single client like that, let alone handle a dozen of them. But I do have roughly a dozen clients that I will case manage and flow through and do regular check-ins and making sure that they're happy, healthy at all times.
And now, as we're sort of getting towards the end of the chat so far, and again, thank you for your time. Is there anything that you, I know, that you've actually written a number of books as well, so having authored, I think 5, I think I've got down here: Body by Design, The Big 5 is Alive, Call It Whatever You Want, It's About Being Free, and then there's The Performance Pyramid, which I had a little read of because I think it was on your website, as a little link there, and then The Ultimate Headache and Migraine Relief Guide. I think the last one is probably the most obvious as to why you would write it. The synopsis of it is probably self-explanatory by the title, but I was hoping that you might actually give me a little brief sort of synopsis on the reasons why you wrote the other titles, sort of the point of the book, or why it is that you began writing in the first place. What was the value that you were trying to put into the world from those? We might start off with the Body by Design.
Look, Body by Design was a simple booklet that my clients actually asked me to put together. And so it was a basic book that looked at what are you actually trying to do and design for yourself. And so it really was looking at lifestyle factors and saying, how do we put this all together? It was a step-by-step process that somebody could take home and go, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. So we had sleep, we had stress, we had diet, we had exercise. It was designing the body that you wanted in a step-by-step process. As we moved on from that, probably the biggest book and took the most amount of time was The Big Five as Alive. This, for me, was really designed or created for myself, and that was to articulate and put pen to paper and really get clear on what I was reading at that time, what I was trying to convey to clients, and what I felt was working clinically to help people get their good outcomes. And so the Big Five Alive is looking at mental and emotional health, it's looking at spiritual health, and it's looking at physical health. The fifth element of that is being aware that all of those will contribute to whether you're physically healthy and symptom-free. So again, one topic we really haven't talked about at this point is mental and emotional health. And one of the biggest red flags in here is when people walk in and they don't have mental emotional health. And that's where, again, I call on other health professionals to help me. And again, I've got Gestalt therapists, I have psychologists where required, I have psychiatrists where required, counselors, etc., that are going to help to assist me to work with clients that maybe are struggling through mental and emotional health. Because again, it's a pecking order of systems, and where you don't have mental emotional health, more than likely you're not going to be able to alleviate symptoms within the body. And so that's a big red flag for me. So mental, emotional, and spiritual health is really key to this process. Many people walk in and that's all squared away, which gives you permission and allows you to get into the other systems of the body. But where that's not squared away, you have to be acutely aware of that and potentially get that person help in those areas.
Just on that, how do you flag that for yourself? Is that in your intake forms? Is that just by questions and figuring out the person? And then if you do find that person, maybe needs some additional help in that area, do you go, all right, well, let's get you that help first, then come back here once you've sort of, again, as you say, kind of squared that away a little bit more?
Yeah. Look, again, these are the types of things you're screening for in your intake forms. And so as I go through those intake forms, I know what I'm looking for. And there is red flags all through those intake forms. One of the questions I ask is, what do you think is a reasonable number of sessions for us to alleviate your symptoms? And where someone's had pain for 10 years and they say, you should be able to get me better in 2 sessions. That's a huge red flag. How am I going to get you better in 2 sessions when you've had this chronic pain for 10 years? That tells me that we better address that right up front. Where someone says, I've got poor sleep, I've got 5 kids, I've got a job, I'm not coping, I'm highly stressed, and they've put stress as 10 out of 10, it's a red flag as they walk in the door. And one of my first questions is, are you okay? And why are you scoring 10 out of 10 stress? Is that a relationship issue you're having at home? Is that because you're overwhelmed by running an entire household and 3 kids? Is that because you don't enjoy the employment you're in and you just can't wait to get out of that job? Are you under tremendous financial pressure and you're sitting across from me? I better be very careful what I'm going to charge you then and how many sessions we're going to do. So there is red flags from a mental, emotional, and spiritual point of view that you can pick up through the intake forms. And then again, a skilled practitioner in this room, in creating conversation, you have to listen to and read between the lines, which is what they're telling you about their life outside of the clinical room.
Is there somewhere where, again, even the Big Five is alive? Is that something that people can grab and read it from anywhere?
Look, we self-published that book because it was something that publishers just weren't willing to take on board because of the content of that book, which is fair enough. And so we just published 10,000 books and they've all sold in a couple of years and they've gone. It probably needs a rewrite anyways. So there's books circulating out there, but
Okay.
no, I'm not selling any of these books anymore. As I said, it was really an exercise in putting pen to paper and getting clear on my clinical process, getting clear on the messages that I was delivering to clients. And I think it's a really great way in writing books to be clear of thinking as a practitioner.
And is there anything else that you'd like to leave the audience with? So the idea being for many out there that might just be searching for answers to their problems, anything you might like to leave them with?
Well, I think the first thing is that podcasts like this, they're out there. You can listen to them free of charge. You can take on this kind of information and you can start to apply it to yourself. Other podcasts I've started to mention, it depends on the guests that come on, but Joe Rogan's bringing on health professionals. You've got Diary of a CEO, where he's bringing on high quality health professionals and talking about various topics. One of my favorites about 10 or 15 years ago was Underground Wellness Radio with Sean Cruxton. There was 200 episodes all based on highly skilled health professionals. So this information is out there. You can listen to it free of charge. You can glean information and then begin to apply it to yourself. The number one message: when you're not healing, you're probably doing it to yourself. And I know that's a hard message, but first thing to do is, why don't you keep a lifestyle diary for 3 or 4 days, everything you do from morning to night, and then look at it yourself as an investigative tool and say, what could I do differently to put myself in a state of healing? And that doesn't matter if it's elbow pain and tennis elbow, whether it's back pain or migraines. First thing you need to do before you see a practitioner is to say, how can I clean up my lifestyle factors? How can I put myself into a state of optimal health? Therefore, when I go to receive treatment from the therapist, their therapies are more likely to be successful.
Very, very cool, and I think it's nice because anyone can do that. Grab a bit of paper, a little pen, note it out, and I think you'd probably find if you were detailed enough with it that you would be probably interested, or maybe at least blown a little bit away about what you find your patterns are for across 3 days alone. But I really want to thank you very much for your time. It's been awesome, and you've definitely been one of the people that I think I said at the beginning sort of gave me permission as still a young therapist in the private world to not be too concerned about the title that you have, but be more interested in, I guess, the ways that you can actually try and help someone achieve the health that's within them. So thank you very much for that, and I'm sure we'll chat again soon. And like for many people that I speak with, one of the things that I'll be trying to do as well in the near future is to actually go through some of the, whether it be assessment or treatment that you've done yourself, if you're open to that, and that way when we chat again in the future, we'll also have a little bit more to chat about from that side.
Sounds fantastic.
Cool. Thank you very much. Cheers, mate.
Thank you.